Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT9, and BT9 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be a new budget-friendly version of Raidenmon. So Raidenmon is a pretty interesting Digimon. He is another heavy machine Digimon similar to Machinedramon, in the fact that we want to utilize multiple Digimon of the same level to make him as powerful and effective as we possibly can. And the big difference between Raidenmon and Machinedramon is the fact that Raidenmon wants to be working with multiple different level 6s instead of multiple different level 5s. Unfortunately, right now we don't have a whole lot of good level 5s that we want to hard play to try to play and lean the deck more into a Megazoo style of deck, but for right now we do have some really decent cards to help make him a really decent stack-based deck to try to utilize him the best that we possibly can. So with all that said and done, onto the actual deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I think the Digitama slot in this deck is kind of flexible. You could really have it be whatever you want it to be. You could run 5 eggs, you could run 4 eggs, and it doesn't necessarily matter as long as it makes sense for you to want to utilize that egg. So for right now, I'm going to be running one copy of Pagumon, just because Pagumon is a good consistency tool, but I'm not a huge fan of Pagumon because we are a stack-based deck and we're not trying to have our Digimon get deleted to try to have some extra consistency. This is just the 5th Digitama. When it comes out and we see it, we have a different way on utilizing our cards. And as a result, the main Digitama of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Makmon as one of the best generic DP boosters that we have in black to be working with. So all we need to do is just have a black tamer in order for our Digimon to get plus 1000 DP, and we are running a couple of black tamers for us to utilize, so that just makes Makmon a super desirable card, especially since there's not a whole lot of DP boosting in this deck to try to make Raidenmon as powerful as we possibly can. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of ToyAgumon. So ToyAgumon is still one of the best generic inheritable abilities that we have on our level 3 slot, just because he has the reboot ability as a nice inheritable to be able to give to our higher level Digimon, so that way we could try to make our higher level Digimon as annoying for the opponent to deal with as we possibly can make them. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Chikuriman. So Chikuriman is just going to be one of the security threats, just because he actually is a security Digimon. Unfortunately, he doesn't play himself after the security check, but at the end of the battle, he does de-Digivolve 1 on one of the opponent's Digimon, which could be really annoying if they're playing into a stack-based deck and trying to rely on some of their cards. A stray check into a Chikuriman could ruin some of their game plan. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Hagurumon. So Hagurumon is an absolutely fantastic consistency tool for how this deck wants to function because, well, it's still playing around with machines and cyborgs. So its on-play ability states that we get to trash 1 Digimon with machine or cyborgs in its traits from our hand to be able to draw 2 cards. So it's helping fill up our trash for our Raidenmon's ability, on top of the fact that it's cycling through our deck, so that way we could try to see the cards that we want to see and set up our trash to make our cards as effective and efficient as we can possibly make them. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Tankmon. So Tankmon is kind of a flex spot for the deck. It could really be anything you want it to be, but I do like Tankmon in this style of deck just because a lot of our inheritable abilities are coming off of our level 5s and our level 6s, so it doesn't necessarily matter what our level 4 inheritables are for the most part, and black doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of good level 4s, so I'm just going to dedicate this slot to some tempo just to try to get into our higher stages as quickly as we possibly can, just because he evos for 1. You could run Numamon in this slot for that similar type of a reasoning, and Numamon does hard play for less than Tankmon, but Tankmon is also a cyborg to be able to synergize with some of our other cards. And for a very similar style of reasoning, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Makmon. So Makmon is a pretty underrated card. He is a cyborg to, again, interact with some of our cyborg-based synergies, on top of the fact that he hard plays for 4, which isn't too bad. Digivolving for 2 is what you're going to be doing most of the time, but ideally this is just going to act as some extra defense just because he has the Decoy Black ability. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Guardraman. So you could split Guardraman with Mechanorimon if you really wanted to, just because they're both really decent blockers. that can't attack during the opponent's turn, but I do think that having some decent inheritable abilities to try to fuel the game plan when we're going into a stack-based deck like this is a little bit more ideal. So it has the nice inheritable ability for our higher stages to use, where when attacking, we get to trash one Digimon with Machine or Cyborg in its traits from our hand to be able to draw 2 cards, so it's just helping with the overall consistency of the deck. Similar to Hagurumon, it's just on an inheritable ability this time. Next, onto the ultimates, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Andermon. So Andermon is a pretty decent card just because he is still synergizing with machines, which is what Raidenmon is trying to do. So a lot of the EX1 machine support cards are going to be helping Raidenmon. So if you really wanted to replace this with any of the other cards from EX1 that are doing something similar to what Andermon is doing, by all means do so, just because his when Digivolving ability on all of the level 5s in black from EX1 have the same when Digivolving ability, where you get to reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, add 1 level 6 with Machine and its traits from among them into our hand, and then trash the rest. So it's just helping look for our level 6s, which we have a decent amount of level 6s that we want to try to find, and then figure out a way to get into our trash, so we could also just straight up mill them if we wanted to off of this type of ability. And then I picked Andermon more specifically because of his inheritable ability, where during the opponent's turn, when this Digimon has Machine in its traits, then it gains the blocker ability, so that way we could try to pair this up with Reboot to make a blocker reboot Raidenmon to be a little bit annoying for the opponent to deal with. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Megadramon. So this is the BT9 version of Megadramon, and this is a pretty solid card to use because it's acting as some Tamer hate. So there isn't a whole lot of Tamer interaction, and the fact that we do have a card that we could utilize to interact with the opponent's Tamers is really, really good. So it has a nice when Digivolving ability, where we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon or Tamers with a play cost of 3 or less. So it's just going to be any utility type Tamer that they want to use, or just their weak Digimon if there is no Tamers in play. Then its inheritable ability states that when attacking, if this Digimon has Machine or Dragonkin in its traits, then we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon or Tamers with a play cost of 3 or less, acting as some good recursive removal. And then the last ultimate of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Rebellymon. So Rebellymon is actually a pretty decent Digimon for this deck to be using, just because if we're going to go into our level 6s, then this card just helps it give our level 6 the blocker and retaliation ability, while also help filling up our trash because we have to discard a card to be able to gain that ability. So that way we're trying to fill up our trash on top of the fact that we're going to be giving our Digimon some really solid abilities, and we could still Digivolve on top of him, even though he is a purple Digimon, just because he has the All Turns ability, where this Digimon is also treated as a black Digimon while he's on the field. So unfortunately, while he's in the deck or in the grave, he won't be a black Digimon, but the fact that we could still utilize him to some effective degree just makes him a really good card, especially since he's also part cyborg, if at worst we just need to use him as discard fodder. And then lastly, onto the Megas. In terms of Digimon, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Raidenmon. So Raidenmon is the main Digimon of the deck, and what the whole deck is centered and focused around. So he does have 2 different Digivolution conditions, where he could Digivolve for 4 on top of a level 5, or he could Digivolve for 2 on top of another level 6. So we could actually think about utilizing our other level 6s in the meantime until we try to find our Raidenmon. Then what Raidenmon is doing is he has the on-play / when Digivolving condition. We get to place 1 Raijin Man, 1 Fujiman, and 1 Tsujiman from our trash underneath this Digimon in any order on the bottom of its Digivolution sources to be able to gain 1 memory for each card we placed. So this is why we want to discard some cards, and more specifically our other level 6s, to be able to feed our Raidenmon and be able to get Raidenmon's ability off to help make him a cheap Digimon to Digivolve into. We could hard play him if we really wanted to, but we don't really need to since we're trying to build him into a more stack-based deck, because this condition triggers either on play or when Digivolving. And then the whole point on why we want to line up this type of play is for his when attacking ability. If the Digimon's Digivolution sources on our level 6 has 3 or more colors among them, then this Digimon gets plus 3000 DP until the end of the opponent's turn, and on top of that, if it has 4 or more colors in its Digivolution source, in terms of our level 6s, then we get a de-digivolve 1 on one of the opponent's Digimon. So the whole point is to try to line up all of our level 6s underneath him to be able to get max value off of this ability for some good DP boosting and some annoying control. And then as far as what our level 6s are doing, that's going to be comboing with him. We are going to be running one copy of Tsujiman. So Tsujiman is a blue and black Digimon. He could digivolve for 3 off of blue and black, but we're not necessarily trying to digivolve up into him if we could avoid it. So he does have a pretty decent ability that actually activates from our hand during our main phase, where if we have a Digimon with Justimon or Raidenmon in its name in play, then we get to pay 1 memory and place this card to the bottom of its Digivolution source. So even if it's not in our trash and we didn't set it up in our trash, he could help put himself underneath our Raidenmon to be able to utilize its ability to its utmost potential. Then he has a nice when Digivolving ability if we're actually trying to utilize the card, where we get to trash 1 Digimon with Machine or Cyborg in its traits from our hand to be able to have one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon go to the bottom of the owner's deck, so it's acting as some extra removal, and it's good removal considering it's tucking instead of bouncing. Then it's inheritable for our Raidenmon to be using is when attacking, we get to return one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon back to their hand, so it's just adding some extra control for Raidenmon trying to de-digivolve the opponent's Digimon. Next, I'm going to be running one copy of Fujiman, and Fujiman is doing something very similar to Raijin Man in terms of utilizing an ability from the hand, and on top of that, this is a black and green Digimon, so it's adding to the overall color count for our Raidenmon, and its when digivolving ability is something similar to Tsujiman, where we get to trash 1 Digimon with Machine or Cyborg in its traits from our hand to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon to be able to want to attack into that Digimon. And then its inheritable ability states that when attacking, we get to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon with 5,000 DP or less, and that Digimon doesn't unsuspend during the opponent's unsuspend phase. So again, we're trying to de-digivolve with our Raidenmon to make it so that their Digimon is weak enough to have 5,000 DP to be susceptible to Fujiman's inheritable ability. And then the last level 6 of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Raijin Man. So Raijin Man is the better of the 3 when it comes to what it's trying to do and its abilities in place. So again, it's still just trying to utilize its hand main ability to just be able to tuck itself underneath our Raidenmon when it's on the field, and then it has a nice when digivolving ability that's acting as some solid control, where we get to trash 1 Machine or Cyborg traded Digimon from our hand to have one of the opponent's Digimon get minus 4,000 DP for the turn, so that way we could actually try to have some alternative ways to be able to delete and interact with the opponent's Digimon. Then its inheritable ability is almost a copy of its when digivolving ability, so when we attack with our Raidenmon, we get to have one of the opponent's Digimon get minus 4,000 DP until the end of the turn, so we could stack this ability to have multiple instances of this ability, on top of the fact that we could have this combo with Fujiman to be able to put that Digimon into that 5,000 DP threshold to be able to suspend it, on top of the Digivolve from Raidenmon to be able to make it weaker so it's more susceptible to both of these abilities, making it just a really good combo card to be playing with for the deck. And then as far as options go, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Attack of the Heavy Mobile Digimon. So this is a really strong card for any Machine or Cyborg based deck to be playing around with, just because it costs 0 and it has the main ability where we get to trash 1 card with Cyborg or Machine in its traits from our hand to have all of our level 6 Digimon with Machine in their traits be able to utilize the Rush ability, so they could attack right away, and have an on-play ability where if this Digimon has Digivolution sources, then it also gains the Blitz ability to be able to attack the turn that we hard play if we actually need to hard play our Raidenmon. And then on top of that, it's acting as the control in our security, where we get to trash 1 card with Cyborg or Machine in its traits from our hand to delete one of the opponent's Digimon whose play cost is equal to or less than the card that we discarded. So this just allows us to fill up our trash when it's checked in security while trying to remove the opponent's threat at the same time. And then the last option card of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Ultimate Connection. So Ultimate Connection is, for all intents and purposes, the Hammer Spark Plus for what Black is trying to do with machines and cyborgs. So its main ability states that we may trash out one level 5 Digimon with a Cyborg in its traits from our hand to be able to gain 2 memory and draw 1 card, with the security ability activating its main. So even though we're running a fewer amount of level 5s than in something like Machinedramon, we still have level 5s that we want to use, and that's why Heavy Machine Digimon is so good, is in case we actually do need to hard play our Raidenmon, we could still gain a lot of benefit for not utilizing our level 5s as a stack material. So it's just a nice card to be able to help gain us some extra resources and cycle through our deck. And if you wanted to, you could actually reduce the amount of Ultimate Connection and run a different option as well as a good complement, just because we're not super hardcore level 5 focused. And then as far as Tamers go, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Izzy. So this is the BT4 version of Izzy, and this is just going to be the memory fixing tamer for the deck. So if you really wanted to run something like the Black Tie, then you could as well. It doesn't necessarily matter. We just care about the fact that we want to always be hard set to 3 if we're ever less than 3. And then the reason why I prefer Izzy is because of his on-play ability, where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, and then all of the revealed cards are black. We get to gain 1 memory, so that way we could at least try to make him cost a little bit less than your average memory fixing tamer, and that also does matter for when he comes out as a security threat to potentially anti-tempo the opponent. And then the last tamer of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Kazoo. So Kazoo is a really fantastic tamer to, again, interact with our machines and cyborgs, because at the start of our main phase, if we have a machine or cyborg traded Digimon in play, then we get to gain 1 memory, helping with our overall memory generation, so that way we can try to make our plays as efficient as we possibly can. Then he also helps feed into what the deck is trying to do with discarding our level 6s to be able to utilize Raidenmon as effective as we possibly can while trying to find those types of cards to begin with, where during all turns, when one of your Digimon with machine or cyborg in its traits becomes suspended, then we get to suspend this tamer to be able to draw 1 card and discard 1 card. So whether that's us attacking or us blocking, it just allows us to use Kazoo as a good digging tool to make sure that our deck is going to be as consistent as it possibly can be. And then there's still just a whole bunch of different tech and tools that you can incorporate into the deck, and this is utilizing my budget rules. So if you want to break those budget rules and try to create something a little bit more powerful, then by all means do so. So as far as other really good cards to think about utilizing, we do have some other solid level 3s in the form of Chumon and Kokuamon as some good anti-meta floodgate cards to try to stop and limit some of the opponent's actions. Then, as I stated before, we do have Mechanorimon as a really good machine level 4 that we could just hard play and act as a good wall for the opponent's early game aggression. And even though the deck doesn't have that high of a damage output, we still could run Grumblemon just because hybrids are really good, acting as alternate win conditions that could surprise the opponent. Then if we are trying to play a more Megazoo-esque style deck, then we do have Warumanzimon as a good level 5 to hard play for 5, so it's a super cheap and efficient card to use. Even when we Digivolve up into him for 2, that again is still just super tempo efficient, making him just a good level 5 to use in general. Then we do have all of the other machine or cyborgs that you want to interact with, well, machines or cyborgs on our level 5 slots to be able to customize Raidenmon's inheritable abilities to match and be what we need it to be. Then we do have the justimon line that we could think about utilizing, just because, well, a lot of the other cards in terms of our level 6s are also referencing justimon, so we could think about utilizing these cards as well. Then we do have some really good level 7s to incorporate into the deck, especially since a lot of our other level 6s are split between 2 colors, so I'm just going to be defaulting to Omnimon Swart, just because Omnimon Swart is one of the best generic level 7s for black to be using, just because he's milling the deck, which is something we want to try to do anyway to see our level 6s in the trash, and then he's going to help revive, ideally, our level 5s to be able to Digivolve into our level 6s to kind of continue the combo train going. Then we do have a whole bunch of different utility option cards for us to utilize. So we have Congo, we have Breath of the Gods, we have Black Memory Boost. There's just a lot of different good utility option cards that we could think about incorporating, on top of some various other removal option cards that we want, like Ultimate Flare and Iron Fisted Onslaught. Then as far as alternative Tamers go, Black has actually a solid lineup of different Tamers that we could utilize. So we could utilize Izzy and Joe for some extra draw and memory generation. We could utilize Daigo as a way to give our Raidenmon blocker alternatively, if we don't want to try to put that ability on as an inheritable or through our Rebellymon. Then we also have Ryo. Even though Ryo's not great, if we are going to be running a justimon mid to low end with the inclusion of justimon, then he's still a pretty decent card to be using. And on top of that, we do have some off-color Tamers that we could think about using in the form of Hiro and Kyoshiro to act as some solid memory-fixing Tamers, just because they're both interacting with the fact that we want to utilize our level 5 or higher Digimon to do various different things. So Kyoshiro will help us with some card draw, and Hiro will help us with some DP. But for the most part, this is just my interpretation of a solid core or shell for how to utilize Raidenmon in a more traditional stack-based deck. Even though he does seem to want to be played more like a Megazoo deck, we just don't have those tech and tools available to us at this time. But I think that Raidenmon is still a pretty fun and interesting Digimon. Even though he doesn't have that high of a damage output compared to a lot of the other decks, he's still just a very easy and affordable deck to make, just because a lot of his core parts and pieces are going to be rare and below. So that just makes him a very accessible deck on a budget. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.